issues for my demographic of students, like socially. Actually, I think I talked about this later, so let me come back to it, sorry. Measuring student learning, I've already talked about a lot of these. There's going to be a rubric for every class discussion. There's a rubric for students to self-assess, and there's a rubric that I use to assess. And then I'm going to kind of join the two together. Bookmark sentence starters, I'll show you that in a minute. Book club self-reflections, which is tied into the rubrics. Reflective writing, so after every book club discussion, there's a 5-minute free write. Like, what did you learn in your book club today? What's something you want to continue to respond to? And that's just a way to track, like, were you engaged? And can you, like, extend what you learned during your book club meeting in writing? Post-it responses, so I monitor, like, how good are your post-its? I kind of, like, do a spot check, like, oh, this one looks like you didn't really, like, think about what you wrote. Or, and then quantity, like, are they doing good work right now? And then power responses, Venn diagram with the dialogue partner, like I talked about, comparing and contrasting power, and then the multi-meaning part. This is the example of the response bookmark, and I'm sorry I took a screenshot with a grammar error, so sorry about that. So I have 5 steps for reading for social issues. First, identify a moment where you see the issue begin. Second, name the issue. Think about how the characters respond to the issue. Empathize by stepping inside the character's shoes. Connect to our lives and findings, and as you can see as we go down the list, they become a little bit more connective. So this is just a way for them to read and engage at a deeper level. And then language prompts are what they use during discussion. So can you say more about that? What did you mean when you said? Those are just ways to guide the discussions at a deeper level. So standards for my first lesson for the gateway activity. The goal is that students will be able to apply their prior knowledge and life experiences to problem solve possible solutions to social issues scenarios. So students will use what they know very openly to, like, respond to a social issue scenario, and they'll connect, the social issues that they read in their books to their own life. So the idea of connecting their prior experience to the scenario is the same kind of work that they'll do to make connections between social issues they read about and then their own life experiences. It just kind of sets them up to do that by saying, like, you've seen these in real life. What would you do instead? Or if you haven't, like, what do you think you would do in this kind of situation? And then the standards that are kind of connected to that collaborative discussion, because the scenario work happens in a group. And then standard 1, students apply a wide range of strategies, including drawing on their prior experience. So that's that there. Am I coherent? I'm sorry, I just feel like I'm blabbing. Okay. Developing knowledge and skills acquired from first lesson. So here's what I think they'll get out of the first lesson. Knowledge-wise, they're going to learn that they can effectively problem solve and pose solutions to complex problems. Like, they're going to understand, oh, I did this, and I can do that when I read. Skills, effectively communicating with peers is really the big idea here, and, like, building up to that, like, we're having book club discussions that are really restorative, and, like, where we can really talk openly with each other about issues that we have in our own lives, things like that. Ideally, that's where we would get. Social learning context considerations. So students know how to effectively problem solve personal issues in an open environment. So what's really works for me here is that my school really focuses on restorative justice problem solving, where teacher comes with student, comes with parent, comes with school advocate, and it's a lot of, like, work around resolving problems and restorative justice we talked about, and that's some of our courses. But I think what's really nice about my school is there's not a lot of issues with bullying. It's more about students' issues at home, and it's like this whole idea of, like, we're all advocates for your child, so let's all come together. Or, like, if it's an issue between students, it's like the whole community around that student comes together to one meeting. So this is what really works really nice for me, is that students are already pretty aware of that kind of piece. The open-ended nature of social issues. Okay, so this one allows a variety of students to access the conversation. My students come from very, very different backgrounds. There's a lot of different, like, cultural and ethnic backgrounds represented in my class, so I feel like because it's open, the social issues conversation will most likely be more often be open-ended. Students will be able to bring in really unique experiences. In my unit, students will learn to connect school and life and, like, realize that, like, oh, that's a valid connection. Like, oh, I can do that and that means something. They don't do that a whole lot because they come from turbulent home circumstances. Like I kind of talked about one girl, like that's just an example of like a lot of stories that I've heard. And so students are more, they have more boundaries, like to know to like to not talk about those things. But I hope that with this unit we can open up those doors a little bit more. Creating explicit connections between the text and their lives. This is where students actually like point to the text and say like, if I was in this situation, I would do this. And then, I already talked about that. Gateway activity. So students will be provided with a social issue scenario. There's 4 different scenarios for this class. Power, bullying, racial prejudice, and coming of age. Those are all the issues that are represented across the books. So it's like this idea of like, I'm reading about this scenario, I'm coming away with this idea, oh, this is about bullying, and then I'm going to go read a book about bullying, and then I'm going to continue to grow my ideas about this topic. Students will work with a partner to read the scenario, define the issue, and propose a possible response or solution to the issue. After students have defined the issue and proposed the solution, so it's a group of 2, and then a group of 2 meets up with another group of 2. They become a group of 4 that they're all reading about the same scenario, and they add to their thinking. And then after a group of 4 meets, it leads into a whole class discussion about the scenarios they came across, how they defined the problem, solutions, and then the whole class discussion is going to be open to like, okay, like we've heard what they said, any other ideas, connections, things like that. So just making it even more open to more people. Yeah, after students present their scenario and solutions, there will be a couple of minutes to open, yeah, I said that. Students will also learn to actively read and respond to how their characters deal with issues, like how put themselves in their shoes, how would I have responded differently or the same. So here's an example scenario, and this I would probably like to refine a bit more, but this is kind of what I got so far. So this is in, you'll see which one it goes for. Every morning when Sean's alarm clock goes off, he dreads getting out of bed. Sean hates the idea of approaching another day at school. Against his will, he pulls himself out of bed, eats his breakfast, and heads out the door. While walking, Sean thinks about all the ways that he can make himself invisible. As he approaches Warren Middle School, Sean is already reminded why he hates school so much. Zach and Ian are hanging out next to the doors in the main hallway, pestering kids and making stabbing remarks behind people's backs. Sean knows he has no choice but to enter school through the main doors. He will have to face another day of Zach and Ian. As he approaches the front doors, Sean pulls his hood over his head and looks down, hoping to walk through the front doors unnoticed. Zach and Ian quickly spot Sean and stop him in his tracks. Zach pushes Sean and says, "Where did you get those clothes? Your sister's closet? You're such a girl." So this is where this scenario ends. The question is, you're Sean's friend, you just heard what Zach said to Sean. What do you do? So what's the problem? What kind of social issue? Bullying. Right, so this is an example of bullying. So the students would define the issue, bullying, and then students would propose a response. A group of 2, and then we would move to a group of 4, and then whole class discussion. There would be other scenarios to represent the other 4 topics, the themes for this. Yeah. And, okay. As students talk, this is the rubric that I use. I would use this rubric on their first time talking, and like it would be like a quick conference after, like, here's how you did, here's where we kind of need to look at, and like this would be used to help students like understand what I'm expecting of them. And I wanted to point out that students, so for the scenarios, they would need to refer to the text and create like a reasonable solution. Like based on what we know about Sean, like what would Sean do, and like what could his friend do to help him? Does that make sense? So it has to be like connected back to the text. It can't just be like out of nowhere, like unicorns are flying from the sky and then everything's okay. So that's kind of the expectation there. And then I have some prompts to promote deeper thinking. And again, these are kind of like exactly how they were on the bookmark, but this would also be expected in the scenario conversations of like, what do you mean when you said? Can you show me the text where you're talking about? Can you give me an example? These would be posted, and the students would be expected to like use these prompts. And then I also, as a teacher, during the whole class discussion, would be expected to use these prompts to help us think more deeply about the scenarios. I feel like that's all.